Continue with the sessions under agri-food. The current session is titled Biotechnologies, and there we reflecting on the omics technologies, the nutrigenomics, genomics, metabolomics areas of innovations towards resilient to agriculture. And in this session, we will have, as we heard earlier, two panelists. One is Dr. Rian Piernif, who is our colleague from the biotechnology platform, where those variety of next generation platform for generating the requisite data for all the research that we do are set, and all those data that we use for plants as well as animals. And online we have Prof. Estefan Male-Costa from the University of Pretoria, Department of Animal and Wildlife Sciences. Without further ado, we will we'll connect to get insights from Prof. Esti. Esti, are you connected already?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead.
You can see my screen.
Yes, we can see your presentation. Go ahead. Good luck.
Thank you very much, Prof. Mahalele, for the introduction. And thank you for the invitation to have a brief overview with you today on omics innovations and technologies in the animal domain. Now, as we know, sorry, my presentation, there we go. I will just do a brief introduction on food systems and then move on to technologies. As Rian, I think, will go into the deeper end of genomics, I would like to add something on precision livestock farming and getting the new phenomes measured that we need for the genomics, and then also end up with some information on our topics for subtropical regions in omics. So I think we all are very much aware about on the global population that is growing at such a rapid pace. And if we look at the expectations, then we have to increase our food production immensely to be able to feed the 2 billion people in the next 30 years. So the pressure on our food system will increase, and therefore very important to consider what is food insecurity, because it translates into both malnourishment as well as hunger. And on a global scale, more than 11% of the population is insecure. On our own continent, a fifth of people are facing hunger. Sub-Saharan Africa, a quarter of people are malnourished. And closer to home, 6.5 million people are either hungry or severely food insecure. So recent statistics on what's been happening in South Africa is that obesity has been increasing, while children under 5 years are still growth stunted. So that brings me to my discussion. When we think about how are we going to solve this problem, let us remind ourselves that food systems are really complex. In a 2020 publication by Brouwer et al., various definitions were discussed, and the views are very divergent on what food systems mean. Because for these food systems, we need appropriate technologies. And the expert panel of the UN Committee on World Food Security concluded that if we want to define food systems, it's all the components and activities related to production, processing, distribution, and consumption, and it also includes markets and policy networks. And you might ask me, but why? I give this perspective because in production we use omics, but further in the downstream value chain, big data can play an important role. So in terms of the elements, the insecurity, it translates into insufficient food production or the lack of specific protein, food availability, access to food. And this is driven by the demand for food, the growing population, environmental factors, water, soil, climate change. All of these factors play a role in terms of the drivers of food insecurity. And we can conclude by saying that we can recognize livestock and agriculture in the broader sense, crops, plants, will play a central role in safeguarding the region's food supply. And this then links directly with the SDGs in animal production. And it's not only 1, 2 that plays a role, but important in terms of health and well-being, climate action, life on land. All of these are important, and it again emphasizes this multi and interdisciplinary approach that we require in our discussions for resilient food systems. Important that the technology then, what do we need? And it was noted by the same authors in 2020 that we need technology to improve our food systems, and most of this is happening in the environmental space, biophysical factors, but the uptake seems to be slow. So in the next 15 minutes, I will try and focus on some of the technologies that are related to the increasing of the efficiency of the production and the resilience of our systems. So it brings us to precision livestock farming as a start. And this precision livestock calls for platforms where we can either prevent a disease happening and prevent or ensure good welfare and do some predictive analysis. So if we look at the diagram here from the article from Nita Rajan and Kemp, a recent one from 2021, you'll see that a very broad range of data can be measured and generated through the use of precision livestock farming technologies. From facial expression data, vocalization for stress and welfare activities, all of these can play a role. And why this is so important is this type of data, if we can link this to genomic, it provides us with various opportunities. And then obviously our other colleagues in the policy space will come on board, and strong bioinformatician and big data support will also be required. We know that our consumers are much more aware of where their food comes from and how it's being produced. So traceability is needed for several reasons. Food safety is also important, in addition to also having sound animal welfare. And this is where precision livestock farming holds some of the potential solutions. If we look at specific examples in the animal space, we see the RFID technology, monitoring with video technology, feed and water monitors, milking and pedometers and collars, therefore, in the dairy space. In a paper by Schillings, 2021, it was noted that our animal herds are likely to increase with 5-fold and 3-fold increases in poultry and pig farms. And the higher the intensification of these systems, which also include dairy, we will have to rely on technology where we can manage these units in a way where production can be optimized, as well as the health and the welfare of these animals. Now, it's interesting to note that when we look at these examples displayed here, the technologies that are working at the moment, very much in the feeding and drinking space, where these technologies have reached the validation stage and commercialized stage. Something like the bolus has been very well commercialized in cattle, but in some species like the sheep, we do not have many of the examples that has passed the proof of concept stage. And imaging technology also still seems to be in the proof of concept stage. RFID in cattle, pigs, is in the validation stage for both drinking and water behavior. And monitoring these behaviors are essential in intensive production because they serve as early warning systems. A change in intake is a warning for either the management of feeding, the access to food, and the quality provided. While if the animal is not eating and drinking, it could be a social behavior change, some examples, for example, bullying and a feedlot, or underlying illness and or a health condition. And if we can have an early warning via the RFID technology, it could reduce morbidity, and it's got good implications for having welfare, growth and efficiency, and also the overall profitability of the system. There are also several examples of the use of sensors, and here we can again include the pedometers and the collars in dairy, which can be linked to their activity for fertility detection. In goat production, which is more extensive, drones are also employed. They're using sensors to monitor tail biting. Video monitoring are used also for identification of agnostic behavior. So all of these, including also technologies for just general monitoring of air temperatures, water and quality, are all in stages of development from proof of concept up to validation. Where we are still having challenges, which is important for our dairy, is of course with claw health. Not so easy to do measurements there and do monitoring. And this could also have positive effects if we can have routine monitoring for fertility and longevity in the dairy industry. So there's a lot of developments for sensors and video imaging to detect lameness in the dairy industry. Before I come to specific South African examples, I just also want to mention the climate change and reduction of emissions that we are under pressure with. In the rumen, the metagenic archaea, we use the hydrogens to reduce the CO2s and producing CH4s. And in South Africa and Southern Africa, where we have large areas that can only be utilized by ruminants, there is an urgent understanding, a need to understand the rumen microbiome. And this is where the omics technologies, such as the metagenomics and metabolomics, can assist us with identification of biomarkers, because these hold potential also for genetic solution where we can select for a higher efficiency and also adapt feeding approaches to minimize CH4 prediction. So we would probably see more of these research coming out in better understanding of microbiomes of our farm animals. And a very good review by Asselstein and co-workers on the omics technologies that are available for ruminant animals. Because of the dynamic nature of the rumen microbiome, not an easy field to study and requires some interdisciplinary teams to provide the answers that is needed there. In South Africa, we are in a relatively startup phase for precision livestock farming, some technology in the proof of concept phase, predominantly used by commercial producers due to high costs, and there's a need for more interdisciplinary collaboration between scientists and, for example, the engineers in terms of being able to monitor some of the phenomes that we are interested in on a routine basis. In terms of genomics, I think this is where our omics have developed the fastest and produced or gave us the foundation for omics. large investments have been made in the world and also in Africa. If we think of the Africa Dairy Genetics Gains project that was funded by the Gates Foundation, and also in South Africa, the Beef and Dairy Genomic Program. So the technologies in the genomic space is developing at a very fast pace. The previous colleague of ours in animal breeding always said, if you take 3 weeks of holiday, you will find that there is a new software or a new method in place when you come back from your holiday. So a very fast developing space if we think of genotyping, genotype by sequencing, and also whole genome sequencing. But this brings us to the question of these huge volumes of big genomic data that is being produced. So it's the 3 V's in terms of the volume, the velocity, and the variety. And we need the storage capacity and the bioinformatician to assist with these data analyses. So we have to be able to try and keep up and manage. So although we've been quite successful in our genotyping of our farm animals, our indigenous stock, moving to whole genome sequencing more recently, we are generating the data. Can we keep up the storage as with the analysis of this data? I found this reference very appropriate and also quite giving us some food for thought. Ribeiro and co-authors wrote a review specifically on the omics for subtropical regions. And they mentioned some of the success stories there with regard to the research in meat quality, specific in the Bos indicus cattle, heat stress and dairy, rumen microbiota, and tropical diseases. And what is notable is that we're talking about the animals that are the same. These are the only animals that of land which we can't grow crops on. So they are suitable to these extensive production systems. And I think this is where the omics actually has a lot of potential so that we can optimize what we have in terms of these ruminant animals and the environments that they can utilize, which can't otherwise be used for other staple food production. Omics, as I said, we are generating a lot of data. We can use this data in different levels, from the driver's seat up to the policy seat, in terms of fighting the poverty and the hunger that is experienced in our African continent. It's crucial that data will be monitored, but also utilized. So definitely we need to embrace the technology, and by doing that, we would have to form bigger teams and with more multi and interdisciplinary approaches. So omics technology holds potential for improving livestock within certain environments. Africa's got their own challenges. It's expensive, but can be source. I think we need to identify and understand where African food systems can benefit from to move forward. I'd just like to thank my postdoc and postgrad students who assisted with the preparation of this presentation. And I would like to thank you for your attention, and just remind you that if you want to go fast, you go alone. But with Omics technology, I think we need to go far, and then we need to go together. And with that, thank you very much.
Thank you for the comprehensive and insightful presentation, Prof. Van Marle Auguste. We almost lost you on the last slide. You were buffering a bit, but I'm glad that we managed to get you through to the end of the presentation. So, so they say we will need 100% more food in the next 30 years, and 70% of that will need to come from technological innovations. And I think Prof has detailed some of the technologies in bits and pieces here and there. And I think the next session will coin them together in terms of how do we now maximize impact in those technologies. So I think we will allow a couple of questions so that we can release her after this engagement. So Esti, with that, I'll start with one question to say you've mentioned over and again that there will be other technologies from digital sensors as well as camera imaging that will need to complement omics data towards big data. But the question that I have for you is, do you think we have the infrastructure as well as the skills requisite to maximize use and impact of all these technologies? And from that, I'm not only talking to the elite economic sector, I'm also talking towards inclusive growth.
Linky, that's a very, very good question, because this technology is expensive. And I think that where we are now, even in the commercial side, we are still testing. We haven't got enough of these measurements as yet to confirm that they're going to work in the commercial space for us. So it's going to take some time. But on the other hand, if we think about applications on cell phones for data recording, then I do think we should not wait until everything works in the commercial space before we start thinking innovatively on how we can measure some of these traits to generate data for our developing sector as well. So I think there's enough more, I would say, technology that can happen on a cell phone that needs to be explored, where we can also assist farmers in remote areas to collect some data.
Thank you. I will allow a question or two for Prof. Van Marle Auguste before she disconnects. Any other question? Okay, go ahead, Farah. We are still sorting the mic, Esther.
Okay, thank you, Prof. Esther, for that presentation. So I have two questions for you. The first one is really on the level of uptake of these technologies in Africa, whether in South Africa, but more so particularly on the smallholder farmers. I think where I'm coming from is with these technologies, there's often the perception that the poor would actually increase the divide, would increase the gap between the smallholder farmers and the commercial, the big farmers. So how are you seeing that in livestock in South Africa and in Africa as a whole? Then my next question comes from the previous interactions that we had in the other sections, which acknowledged or identified the gap that we have in capacity. And I see you coming from the universities. My question will be, in South Africa and maybe in Africa, are we meeting that, or are we addressing that challenge? Have we seen an evolution in the education sector in trying to build the capacity that's required with all these technologies, capacity across the value chain?
Maybe the first question first. In terms of the uptake for the smallholders, unfortunately, I think that over so many years, the smallholders has been neglected, and I think it's because we are not defining the smallholders correctly. We have to have a better understanding of what is a smallholder and what is the market-orientated farmer, because I think the market-orientated farmers will be able to tap into the technology. But for, say, example, if we look at the pig industry, and we have 900,000 pigs in the informal sector, and how are you going to include pig keepers? And there I think we should challenge the industries and say, what type of technology can you develop that will assist overall the system and the value chain? So some of these technologies will have to tap into improving the whole value chain and not necessarily be the cost of that individual farmer, but the technology can be used to generate data that could benefit that individual who has maybe 10 pigs and is not part of a big commercial system. So but I definitely don't have all the answers, and maybe I'm just idealistic, but I do think that we have to understand the topics that needs to be addressed for higher food production, and then find the suitable technology or omics technology that will make the difference for our specific system. And obviously cattle, sheep, pigs will differ in terms of the technology that we use. And then with regard to capacity building and education, I think we're not moving fast enough, because especially with bioinformatics, we are still definitely do not have the capacity that we require to evaluate and analyze the data that we are generating. So we'll have to move faster.
Thank you. Is there any last question, comment? Just.
Thank you so much, Prof, for such an insightful presentation. My question is almost close to what Dr. Faraikas asked. For instance, if maybe before I ask my question, I will make an example. For instance, in some sectors, for instance, in nutrition, if we want a farmer to understand why must she or he give an animal a balanced diet, we will make an example, for instance, that can you give your kids pap? Then the farmer will say, no, I can't give my kids pap only. Then we ask why. She will say, no, they need protein. Then the farmer already answers himself, why is it necessary for her to give animals a balanced diet? So my question is, how can we try to simplify this complex technology to a farmer in such a way that a farmer will understand that when I feed my animal, it's more than just a protein and an energy. That the microbial composition is important. How can we just put it in a lower level so that a farmer can understand whether the farmer is at commercial or the farmer is at the developing setup?
So we need, in terms of our extension officers, we will have to train them that they understand omics technology to be able to convey those messages in a digestible form to the farmers. So the scientists are not always the correct people to send to the farmers, but we need our extension officers trained in the technology.
Okay. Let's give her another round of applause, please. Thank you so much for the comprehensive and informative presentation, Prof. Van Marle Costa. On behalf of the organizing committee for Track 3, I wish to thank you, especially for stepping in at the 11th hour. So good luck with the rest of your day. So colleagues,
Thank you very much.
we will move on to the next panelist, Dr. Rian Pianif, to give another presentation. Over to you.
Thanks, Prof. Linky. I know you've got a flight to catch, so if you run out of here, it's not because my talk is that bad. Great. Thank you, everybody, for joining the session. My name is Rian Pierneef, and I'll be talking about Omics applications in agriculture, what I like to refer to as the digitization of biology, and the applications of these in food and animal production. Now, I apply my trade at the Biotechnology platform at the Onderstepoort campus, where we implement a lot of these Omics technologies. My boss told me I shouldn't advertise, but this is the perfect platform to do it. So this picture was taken by one of our colleagues, Dr. Dirk Swanefelder, early one morning, arriving on time for work. The apologies, it looks like the formatting has gone bad. But so normally I like to start off a presentation by acknowledging the people who make all of this possible. Now, these are my comics superheroes who assist me in using all these multi-omics approaches in agriculture. So it's very important for us to realize our part in the total history of Earth. So if we took the Earth's history and we condensed it into one calendar year, starting on the 1st of January and ending on the 31st of December, we will see in January and February we need to stay inside. There's incessant wind and rain. And then around about February the 25th, life would appear. March, photosynthesis. And then in August and September, we see multicellular organisms and sexual reproduction. In November, we've got a boom of evolution. And in December, we see amphibians, reptiles, mammals, and birds. If we go on to the last day of a full calendar year, humans only appeared at 24 minutes to midnight. We've only been here for 24 minutes of an entire year. And interestingly enough, in the last minute of this calendar year, we started with agriculture. So we've only been farming for 1 minute. Now, agriculture relatively came of age about 12,000 years ago when hunters, gatherers got tired of being killed by their food, and they said, let's rather stay and grow our own crops. And out of agriculture, then cities and civilizations grew, which led to a dramatic population increase. Plant domestication was thought to happen in Mesopotamia, where seeds of wild plants were collected and planted. This included wheat, barley, lentils, and some peas. And then other plants were also cultivated by early civilizations, including rice in Asia and potatoes in South America. Similarly, animal domestication happened in Mesopotamia, where they tamed the wild animals for meat and hides and milk. And goats were probably the first animals to be domesticated, followed closely by sheep. And in Southeast Asia, chickens were domesticated about 10,000 years ago. Now, I'm going to move on to the omics applications we use in agriculture. Now, digitization is defined as the conversion of information into a computer-readable format. And these are some of the omics applications we use. Now, genomics would be the sequencing of the DNA of an organism. We'll get the genomic architecture of an organism. Transcriptomics would be focusing on the functionally active portion of the genome. Microbiomics is looking at the microbial composition, the environmental microbial composition. And then phenomics would be looking at the phenotype, the visual characteristics of an organism. So I'm a bit of a petrol head, and what I do is I try and relate these types of things into something that people would understand. Now, genomics would be similar to getting all the specs of your car, your favorite car. How fast can it go? What's the fuel consumption? What's all the extras? But all of this is then on paper. Transcriptomics would be like getting into your car and taking it for a drive. You can see how quickly it does drive. What is the fuel consumption on the road? Microbiomics would be to sitting in a traffic jam, and you've got all these other cars around you. You have cheap cars, expensive cars, big cars and small cars. It's maybe a Ferrari. And this is all of the cars on the road. Phenomics would be like the e-toll gantries or those friendly traffic officers along the road who take a picture of you and tell you how fast you are going. So let's start off with genomics. We do genomics based on next generation sequencing. It's where we sequence the DNA of an organism. Fortunately for us, next generation sequencing has grown in leaps and bounds. And something which was relatively expensive a few years back has become a lot cheaper. COVID really highlighted the impact and efficiency of next generation sequencing. And we're seeing a big influx of platforms in South Africa to be able to produce the genomic data. Now, how does genomics work in agriculture itself? So we are able to use genomics for breeding programs and to improve the production and the potential of our agricultural products. This is also used for safety. So I'm sure everyone can remember a few years ago where polony was trying to kill us, and genomics was used to identify what was happening there and where these foodstuffs were coming from. Now, microbiomics is really, it's a big passion of mine. What's fantastic about it is that we do not need to isolate and culture microorganisms. This is a very, very difficult, laborious, and time-consuming part in the lab. In microbiomics, we sequence from the environment itself. This gives us a very better understanding of what is really happening in the environment as we see it. I've been seeing a big uptake in microbiomics in our platform, among researchers, and among industry. I am being approached by commercial entities and people in the agricultural sector quite a lot in the past few years regarding microbiomics and metagenomics. And again, you know, this fits so nicely into climate change. We just had a paper accepted yesterday on how the microbiome influences methane emission in cows supplemented with a different foodstuff. And this is where we're really changing the world piece by piece. Transcriptomics is then where we sequence the functional part of a genome. That's what's happening. That's what's actively being done. And this really gives us a very good idea of not just the potential, but actually the capacity of an organism. And why do some organisms and some species and some cultivars perform better than others in certain conditions? Now we're seeing this uptake and increase in agriculture, again in the commercial sector, where transcriptomics is used across the board. So I'm sure all of you heard about the mRNA vaccines with COVID. Now they're busy developing stuff like this for plants, where they're going to use vaccines for plants. And this is where we get our information from to be able to do this, by using transcriptomics. Now, phenomics is then probably one of the newer additions to the omics field. This is where we capture and digitize the phenotypic information of plants and animals as they grow through their life cycles and production cycles. Now, this is perfectly summed up in the equation where the phenotype is equal to the genotype plus the environment. If we have the phenotypic information and the genotypic information and the environment, we're really able to balance out this equation. Now, this is also been taken up in agriculture with massive scanners across vast fields. It's been used in cows, and really taking pictures has never been this cool because you've got an application for it. You can use it to increase your productivity and your produce. So, in essence, these were just some of the omics technologies currently available. And they work best if we join them all together. They should be used in unison. The one shouldn't be standing alone from the other. And then we will use these omic technologies to produce food for our children and develop a resilient food system. What we should also realize is that this omics solutions are developing very quickly. The figure here is an analysis of 133 startups, and of those startups using multi-omics technologies. Unfortunately, again, all of these are based in the Northern Hemisphere. We are really getting behind, and we should use these technologies as quickly as possible. So in conclusion, omics technologies would be defined as the digitization of biology, where we take the biological information and we convert it into a computer readable format and use that to do analysis and research. Thank you. It's always the bioinformatician slides who get messed up, the computer person slides. I don't know.
Thank you, Rian. I just know that I would not want to be stuck in traffic in my Ferrari with a small car. Thank you about that elaborative presentation about all those different omics technologies that are available for us to explore and which ones are more faster than others. I just have one question for you. So there's so many of these omics technologies, and I'm just wondering if there is any example of practical applications of them together. Is there any example anywhere else where they have combined and are using that for production purposes?
The examples in the human health sector are incredible, and this is unfortunately where how it normally happens is that the money gets pushed into the human health sector, and then the agricultural sector will come from behind. In South Africa, I don't think we have good examples of this. We do have some small projects where we've got genotypic information, phenotypic information, where it should be combined. But we are definitely lacking in expertise in this area, in combining all the multi-omics information, and then to provide a product to a farmer. Because unfortunately the farmer doesn't want to see all these nice pictures and cool graphs and charts. He wants a yes, no. Is it going to make me money or not? You know, is it worthwhile? And there I would say we will definitely be lacking, that we cannot offer a product as such.
Great. Any other questions for Dr. Pianif? Okay, I see two hands. Any other hand? Okay, you can go ahead and then you follow.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the talks. So, firstly, there's just another omics that I'll be touching on, which is we're trying to coin the term in science. It's ionomics. So that is part of my research that I've been doing, which it looks at the nutrient composition of plants. I've been looking at plants, and it's just one thing that I want to bring up. So I was looking at seed lots that you find in Pick and Pay, and I'm not going to name the company, Pick and Pay, ShopRite, and those. And just as a preliminary study, I looked at the nutrients of the seed itself, because of course it's going to develop into a plant. So I want to see the initial nutritional content that these seeds have. I found some shocking results, and I'm not too sure why these companies are still selling these seed lots, because I did a screening across a few bean cultivars. And what shocked me was, I was in Harry Smith recently, and there was a granny that was looking at these seeds, and she purchased, or she was about to purchase, this seed, and I asked her, why is she choosing this one? And I have been following through my years of postgrad, I have been following with this, how can I say, bean cultivars that this company is producing or selling. And it's a fairly new seed lot. And what the granny said shocked me. She said, it's new, so it's improved. And what I found, I'm specializing in iron nutrition, but I also look at all the other nutrients. And this seed lot, or this cultivar, had the lowest nutrient profile of all the bean cultivars. So I feel like in our university we have this machine. So I feel like the universities and the farmers, or not the farmers, but they should employ universities to actually do these analysis for these plants and for these seed lots, and then they do not have this knowledge or this information on the websites, because I went to go check their websites. All they say for seeds is how to plant them, when's the best time to grow. They don't give us the nutrient composition, and I think that's where food insecurity comes in, and also hidden hunger, where it's the malnutrition, because we think we're eating nutritious food, but it's not nutritious at all. So I feel like companies, universities should all come together, whoever has the technology, and start building this database that you guys are saying for the commercial farms and for like your subsistence farms and all of anyone growing plants, just to know the nutritional qualities of the plants they're growing.
Yep, that's a fantastic point. So firstly, on omics, these were only a few examples. There's a joke where, how do you define scientific success? It's if you can create your own word. And the nutritional aspect of it is so important. What is the point of eating a whole bowl if you can eat a little bit, but you get the same nutritional information? And that's fantastic. And that all then again links up on how consumers should be informed on what they are eating, but they should also be maybe taught or informed that you need to be informed. To say that this is important, to realize that this is things you need to know. And it's really interesting what you're doing. I think it's fantastic. And what I would like to do is to get some genomic information on that seed. Where does it come from? What's going on there? So that's very nice. Great. Thanks.
Excellent point that you've made. There's really a gap, and we need those kind of partnership to close that gap. I can give also an example in livestock. When genomic selection was introduced about 10 years, just over 10 years ago, biotech companies and AI companies would come and sell semen to our farmers and say this animal has been genotyped, so it is a very, very good animal. It's exactly the same example that you've given. So as long as it's genotyped, it's snipped, so it's a perfect bull that you can use in your head. There was a hand here.
Hi, thank you for the presentation. So I just have a question about the microbiome. So I'm also focusing on the microbiome of the plant. So I just want to find out if, let's say, you identify a very beneficial microbe, maybe let's say within the soil or within the plant, which is endophyte, and then you want to perform further analysis. Let's say you want to test if that microbiome, maybe you inoculate or you prime the plants, maybe that promotes the plant growth and so forth. Since it's only you only analyze the environmental sample, like how do you come across, like how do you solve, let's say, the culture dependent method? Because if it's just in the soil, you want to isolate a specific one, and how do you culture them for further analysis?
Yeah, so that's a fantastic question, because that is what it leads to, is how do you commercialize it? Yeah, because if it's beneficial, you want to put it in a bottle and you want to sell it, and that's fantastic. That's what research is about. The problem you have is that a lot of times some of these microorganisms are viable but not culturable. As soon as you take them out of their natural environment, they don't enjoy it and they die. And that is where a lot of work would be you'd have to do to firstly see, can you isolate? Probably not, because you need to propagate as well. You need to grow it. But then to say, maybe it's not just that organism on its own. Yes, maybe it is the community rather. Especially in metagenomics and microbiomics, a lot of more work is being done on network analysis, where the sum is greater than the whole of its, or the whole is greater than the sum of the parts, where it's rather the community working together than that one individual. But then again, how do you commercialize that? And maybe it's just playing around with levels of certain organisms and to sell it. But that is a very, very difficult thing to do in isolating and growing individuals from the soil sample. Yeah. Thanks.
Thank you for your questions, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give Dr. Rian Pianif another round of applause. Thank you for the time. I think I will hand over now to my dear colleague, Dr. Petronella Chaminuga, for the next session.
Good afternoon, colleagues. So what have we learned today? Again, good afternoon, colleagues and friends and not family. So what have we learned thus far today? Or I should rather say, what have I learned as an agricultural economist, is that biotech operates a lot in three fields: medicine, the environment, and agriculture. And as Rian said a while ago, it seems that medicine is sort of the forerunner, which makes sense in a way, isn't it? Our CEO said at some point, and there he's leaving, that 14% of the GDP in Africa is agricultural related. He also said that more than 50% of employment on the continent, and I have this internal debate, and Dr. Chamanuka is not helping me. Some people say on the continent, and other people say in the continent. Now, I believe on the continent is the right way, but I might be wrong. What was also said is that tech uptake in Africa is slow. So I'm just raising a few of these points before we start to get our minds going. Is that true? Another speaker earlier today said tech in medicine today is the key to tech in agriculture tomorrow. Don't know if you picked that up. I found that rather interesting because tech in medicine is, well, in the last few years we learned that it is incredible. Then, just briefly, give me 3 minutes. Tim Cohen is a journalist for the Business Day, and he has a daily article that he writes after the bell relating to the JSE, I assume. He reported last week on a 2012 book called Abundance, The Future is Better Than You Think. That 2012 book was written, of course, then 10 years ago. Now, 10 years ago seems like not so long ago. I didn't have hair then, and I don't have hair now. So for me, it's not that relevant. But what did we have in the meantime? In 2012, Barack Obama got his second term. What did we have since? We had a grotesque character as president of the US, and we had a journalist, also sort of grotesque, as prime minister in the UK. So that if we think that was progress, then yeah, okay. But in this book, in the specific book of 2012, the predictions were online learning will take off. Now we know that's true. There will be faster computer chips. There will be a lot of biotech in food. There will be greater online participation. There will be more solar energy. There will be more 3D printing. And what was not mentioned was the mRNA advances in medicine, cloud computing, crypto technology. Now, Tim then goes on and says, but hey, 3D printing and nanotech and agri-tech didn't really take off to the same level as online learning and so on. And I sort of, being in the agricultural sector, felt that, hey, that wasn't completely fair. And after today, I believe it was absolutely not fair. We had some beautiful presentations on the role of agri-tech. But yeah, so there is a lot of evidence of agri-tech, but maybe it's not expanding as rapidly. So this is or the topic of this session is convergence and scaling innovation for impact. And I'm going to invite my colleague and my boss at the moment, Dr. Chamanuka, to start off with the first presentation. She will introduce herself in more detail. Thank you, Petronella.
Thank you, Dr. Fusco, and good afternoon, everybody. And thank you for being here. There's a bit of a change in the order of presentation, so I hope it doesn't kind of disrupt the effectiveness of the floor. The colleague that was supposed to present online was supposed to go first. He was talking more about convergence, and I'm here to talk more about scaling the innovations. But they are related concepts, so I think we should still be fine. Sorry, where do I move to the next slide? Okay. All right. Okay, so yeah, I just started off with, I think, issues that have come up time and again since this morning, not only in this room, but in the plenary as well. And the first issue is that technologies, a lot of the technologies that are being developed, most of them are, it's almost as if they're being developed for the shelf and the value of death. Quite a small proportion actually makes it to the intended target beneficiaries for one reason or the other. And then, even as we talk so much about this technological progress, we still have the traditional problems in Africa of poverty, food insecurity, low yields in agriculture, vulnerability to climate change. These remain realities of the African farmer. And then the third issue is also that there is public investment in R&D that is declining. So it's as if the input into the R&D process is becoming less and less, and yet on the other side we're faced with a problem of population growth. So somehow we either need to put more or we need to re-engineer the whole R&D system so that we get more out of it. So the question is, how do we ensure that farmers and particularly small-scale agro-business dealers adopt the technologies that are developed, and from these adoptions they are able to realize positive impact? And I want to emphasize positive there, as you will see soon from my talk, that not all impact is positive. And also, how do we ensure that for the technologies that are developed, we're able to have the entrepreneurs avoid the valley of death, and also we are able to realize these technologies to be scaled, because if we don't scale innovations, then we really do not actually translate them into usable products. So just to introduce a bit the concept of scaling, there's scaling up, scaling out, scaling deep. There's different types of scaling. And I use the reference from McLean and Gagani. They have a book that I can provide a reference for, but that particularly focuses on training, scaling innovations that arise from public investment, so more like your public good innovation scaling. So if one talks about scaling up, then you can think, they use the example of an apple tree, where they say, okay, when you want to talk about scaling up, you have an apple tree that produces problems that we have to address as research and innovation. And then also, like I said, you can scale up, out and deep, regardless of whatever approach to scaling you take. The focus should be on scaling of positive impact, not just scaling in innovation. So sometimes we kind of get obsessed with numbers, but it is not a numbers game. It's about the impact. Okay, so like I said, I keep emphasizing this because what we also know now is that not all technological innovations have positive outcomes for society. And I think the science community has made some significant progress in terms of kind of re-engineering ourselves to think towards impact, not just research as an end in itself. If one looks at the history in terms of the paradigm shifts in science, you'll notice now that there's more and more talk of research for development, which Dr. Maginga referred to as a challenge-led kind of development. And then you've got inter and transdisciplinary approaches becoming more and more the norm. And then you've got a lot of effort as well and development of capacity towards commercialization of publicly funded intellectual property. And then you've got concepts of co-creation and co-ownership of knowledge, which Dr. Maneshri also made reference to. And now we also have a new kind of concept that is coming up, and that is scaling science as a new research focus, almost like a new discipline. And what is scaling science? I borrow this from McLean and Gagani, their definition of it. They define it as scaling scientific research results to achieve impacts that matter. And then they make a two-pronged definition. The second aspect of it is development of a systematic, principle-based science of scaling. So it doesn't happen on its own. It's a capacity that we have to develop. And when we develop that, it's because we, the efforts that we make, we believe that they can increase the likelihood that innovations will benefit society. And when we talk about impact in this context, it is viewed as a multidimensional goal in terms of scaling. You can talk about magnitude of impact, which is more your numbers, then the variety of impact. So if you have a technology, what are the different types of impact that it can have? And then you can discuss it as well from an equity perspective, where you can actually analyze what is the equity of impact that is resulting from a particular research and innovation intervention. And then you also want to talk about the sustainability of impact, because there are so many ideas that really look great, but somehow they don't find themselves being sustainable over time. When I was younger, I remember a lot the Verimark things that would look very attractive on TV. You'd buy a few of those, and 6 months down the line, somehow it became unusable. So what I'm sharing with you today is the results of a process that I was part of, which was facilitated by the Canadian IDRC. They brought together a team of what they call scaling experts from the Global South, because there was a dominance of ideas in this field from the Global North, and their problems are different from us, the technologies, and you know the story. So we got together over a period of about 9 months, virtually discussing what is it that, is the problem with regards to scaling for impact. So we developed this call to action that is kind of directed at funders, development agencies, implementers, researchers, and innovators, with the objective to ensure that we have a world in which innovation and research lead to sustainable and equitable impact for the public good. And I just want to acknowledge those faces that are there as having contributed. This is the website. I can also provide the link for you to access this call. But we outline 8 actions that are pertinent for adoption by research organizations, by funders, and by policymakers, for us to be able to transform our research and innovation funding and implementation, so that we can have this kind of impact at scale that we want. The first one is the need to keep focus on scaling impact right from the start. The objective is not just to have an innovation in itself. We want to have impact at scale. And then for us to be able to get there, we also need to broaden our understanding of participatory approaches that also includes inclusion of different types of knowledge, indigenous knowledge system, having co-creation, in terms of the approach that we use in research. And then we also emphasize making equity of impact an equal measure to magnitude of impact, because sometimes it's really a numbers game. Like, if you have to report, people want to know how many farmers you've reached, never mind what has been the impact. And then, of course, the environment is also an important issue to consider when you design your research and innovation interventions. And then the need to move from beyond a project logic to fund impact. This also has implications in terms of the kind of projects and the duration of projects that we implement. And then the focus should be on supporting a learning culture, because sometimes people run with things that seem to work and they don't leave room to try other things. So we want to have, a learning culture being supported in terms of our research and innovation organizations. And then to also support local solutions, acknowledge the importance of local beliefs and indigenous knowledge systems. and then to also invest in the science of scaling, getting an understanding of what are the drivers, what is the science behind, the translation of research into positive impact. So just to quickly unpack some of them, like I said, if you focus on scaling impact, then it no longer becomes a numbers game. And for public goods, scaling up is only valuable if it leads to a corresponding change in positive impact. So not all research and innovation outputs should be scaled. And then also looking at the possibility that maybe larger is not always good. What appears as though it's larger is not necessarily sustainable socially and for planetary health. And generally, it's time to rethink the purpose of scaling. Why do we keep talking about scaling? Is it about bigger? Is it about impact and optimal scale? And then the second point that we make as well is broadening understanding of participatory approaches, and that involves actually engaging local agency, because if we leave local agency, we risk leaving behind those that are most in need of this impact, and also those that are best placed to contribute to positive change. So the importance of research collaborations, and then to also acknowledge the fact that there is always some kind of potential conflict of interest. There are some that will support the invention, others the intervention, others will not. So one needs to identify who are the winners and the likely losers, and you negotiate with those that are likely to lose from the intervention. And then the pursuit of optimal scale considers the perspective of both those that support and those that do not support. So multi-stakeholder engagement is really key. But all of these actions actually take time, so that means it should be an integral part of the budget. And I liked what the gentleman said when he was explaining that, how do we get the farmers to understand this simple language? That now requires you to go there and engage with the farmers and maybe repackage the information. So we need to have budgets for that. And then you also make equity of impact an equal measure, or even more, for magnitude of impact. Because in our fight, against poverty and environmental degradation, we're also fighting for equality and social justice, because when we don't have those, then we have a problem of instability. So we need to also, integrate those considerations in terms of our decisions, and we must place scrutiny and emphasis on who exactly we are helping and who is being left behind, and also consistently assessing the impacts of our actions and interventions on the equity of impact within any particular society. And of course, then you want to identify innovations that actually reduce the inequality gap rather than those that increase the inequality gap. The environment, it's important, but I don't really think I need to talk about it because I'm speaking to the converted. Everybody knows the importance of this. And then the need to move from a project logic to fund impact. Most project funding cycles last about 2 to 3 years. And by then you really are just sometimes getting started in terms of, kind of finding the light bulb in the innovation cycle. So if you really want to have impact, we're gonna need to have some kind of re-engineering of the whole project cycle to, longer kind of projects, or maybe even split into phases. But also in terms of how projects are designed, you then pick up from previous work that has been done by others. I think as researchers, we have this weakness that you always think you're the first one. You want to kind of start again, but we don't spend enough time understanding what has been done so that we can build on that. And then this kind of thinking as well requires a systems approach to problems solving, because then you're able to actually identify and address the root causes of the challenge. And then looking at this kind of thinking, it is very unlikely that a single project or even a single organization would be able to achieve scaling impact. So that is why we need to collaborate and partner, as well as co-funding mechanisms. So we need to actually reimagine our approaches to research. And sometimes scaling just what works is not really important. Like I said, we need to have room for making mistakes, room for sharing best practices, and to allow us to learn from those mistakes. And then also for sustainability, as well as scaling impact, you need to insist on local solutions. We come from a past where there were a lot of imported technologies that failed to gain the level of necessary traction in adoption amongst our farmers. And that is because we did not consult them. We go there assuming that there's no local knowledge that exists. So we need to acknowledge locally generated evidence that is often overlooked. And then lastly, we need to invest in the understanding of what exactly happens, what are the kind of models that, we can work with in terms of gaining scaling impact. So we need to be systematic and scientific about the way that research and innovation is scaled, so that we can be able to increase the likelihood of it resulting in meaningful change. And then we need some level of investment in collective learning about the scaling impact of research and innovation. I'm aware that there are some existing local communities of practice, and that is good. And then we need to also support and build communities of practice for scaling science, specifically testing different models, commissioning research within and across project portfolios, because there will be differences in terms of what is the best way to reach a scaling impact for different types of innovations and in different contexts. So I'm moving to my concluding remarks now, and I just tried to tie together what has been the discussion since the morning. I think there is no argument that Africa has capacity to innovate, and it is innovating. There is a broad range of digital, biotechnological or omics and social innovations. And then unfortunately though, the old challenges of food insecurity, poverty, low yields and inequality still persist. Also now coupled with new challenges such as the digital divide, vaccine inequity or vaccine inequality, as we found a few years ago. And then the policy frameworks also exist. Having listened to Dr. Maneshri this morning, there is, I think, some policy frameworks in place to guide the required action, and there are also numerous continental initiatives to develop research and innovation solutions that are aimed at addressing the different challenges. And also a reminder that the pie is not getting bigger, so we need to start doing things differently because we also have a growing population problem. So yeah, how do we now move from there? We need to normalize integrating measures of impact in decisions around research funding allocation. So this would be typically addressed at those that are responsible for funding research and innovation. For the researchers, one needs to be deliberate about integrating scaling impact in research and innovation. And sometimes we actually don't have the skills, so we need to work in inter and transdisciplinary teams for us to be able to tap into that resource. And then, I also want to ask, for us to ponder whether Africa is actually investing enough in terms of building intellectual capacity to explore and develop these new fields of science. There are some universities that are actually already offering scaling science as a degree. And yeah, maybe for Africa, we should not wait to play catch up again. There is, I think technology is evolving at a rapid pace, and we have the responsibility to ensure that, the outputs or the benefits from that technology actually reach the desired target groups and they realize the envisaged impact. I had thought earlier of a proverb that Prof. Costi, what's her name? Prof. Este made her last slide when she talked about that proverb that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, then go together. So we also need to think, maybe as a continent, we are focusing too much on going fast, but not going far. So we need to take a step back and really ask what kind of impact are we aiming for and are we getting it? I want to acknowledge, like I said, this work was done in collaboration with other researchers from the Global South, and it was supported and facilitated by Canada's IDRC. And there is a couple of web-based resources that you can look into if you want to learn more about scaling science. There's a whole website about it. And then I also invite you, whether you're a funder or a research administrator or a researcher, to just read this call to action and contribute to that discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Petronella, for that thoughtful and positive presentation. Any questions from the floor? Yes, sir. Is there a microphone for you somewhere?
Okay. First of all, thank you very much for such comprehensive presentation. I'm having a very simple question here. Most of the aspects that you have touched are talking about research. So I'm having this question that as a junior researcher, or if I'm reading this thing that you are talking about, is forming kind of a triangle, if I can say it like so. There is a researcher from the institution. There are researchers in the higher innovators like ARC and other research companies, and there is the small scale farming. So now I'm asking as how are you higher institutions make sure that the junior researchers are doing or are participating in research that will go directly to impact the industry, so as to avoid the thesis or the project that are done at the institution level and that they are staying in the shelf, not impacting directly the higher industry and also the community. Thank you very much.
Any other question at this stage, or should we let Petronella answer this one? There's another one here from Farai.
Sorry, Petronella, I've missed a lot of your presentation, so it might be a question that's asking what you have already addressed. But in your conclusion, you talked about capacity and the need to actually develop that intellect capacity. How do you foresee it? I think there are issues around, universities now are really looking into developing new curricula to suit the demands, the upcoming skills that are required. So if you're looking at scaling up for impact and building capacity, how do you foresee that actually, if I can summarize my question?
I think you can go ahead, Petronella.
Okay, thank you for the questions. I'll go with the first one. How do we ensure that research that is done is not going to stay in the shelf, and also the development of capacity for early kind of career individuals. I think for me, there's already a lot that is happening, but there's always room for improvement. And I think there's three key ways to reach that. The first one is capacity development. We need to integrate this in our university curriculum. And somehow, yeah, the tragedy of South Africa is that, you know, when a student exits the university, what they have learned that they will use in the workplace is actually very little. So we need this student to be exposed right from the start. And what actually distinguishes universities in South Africa is from each other is the extent of collaboration with the private sector, for example, or with the communities where these problems are actually experienced. Universities that have those stronger collaborations, they eventually churn out students that are stronger, that are more, you know, market ready in terms of job placement. And then, yeah, for the majority, then the lecturer is also just reading the textbooks and coming to regurgitate that, and that doesn't really help. So we need to build that capacity, and it's not textbook capacity. We need collaboration, cross-university, junior researcher, experienced researcher, industry, ARC, private sector, university, those kinds of collaborative partnerships. But we also need participatory approaches. We need to go and engage those communities, because I don't sit in my office and imagine what is the nature of the problem that farmers, livestock farmers are facing. I will not find it in the textbook. So before I design my research, I need to go. And the funders themselves, they actually maybe need to place more emphasis on, when you bring us this research to fund, we want to see evidence that you have a client for it. And that is not sufficiently happening. And then in terms of how you develop capacity, yeah, like I said, for somebody like myself that would probably not go sit down and be subject to exams again, it's, you know, short courses. Some of it you learn through interaction with colleagues, but you must also be open-minded, because if we're not open-minded in terms of our interactions, we don't grow. So I think we need to have, you know, to kind of encourage each other, but also organizations to reward this kind of out-of-the-box, you know, ways of doing things. It cannot continue to be business as usual. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Petronella. We leave it at that for now, but please remain there. Our second speaker, and please forgive me if I mispronounce your name, is Dr. Juho Kentaja. I probably messed that up terribly. The doctor is a senior specialist at MTech in Finland, talking about world leaders. They have a very interesting world leader in Finland, those of you who watch the news. Dr. Juho, are you with us?
Yes, I am. I'm trying to make the slideshow visible.
Thank you. We can hear you. I can confirm that. We can see you as well. You have more hair.
Very good, and you can hear me and
Yes.
see me. That's a good start. And now I'll try to share my screen and put the slideshow on.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. One more.
So please go ahead, introduce yourself, and then you can start.
Good. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Juho Kentaja. Actually, I'm not a doctor. Sorry to say this, but but just a master. and I'm from Finland. I work here in a company called MTech Digital Solutions, and I was asked to tell you shortly about the integrated data collection that we have in herd management in Finland, and what this experience has taught us. So my name is Juho Kentaja. I've been working in this company since 2010. The company is a farmer-owned, or actually owned by two organizations that are owned by farmers, and it is the main, so to say, IT service provider for the Finnish agriculture, you could say, and we also provide services outside Finland, especially in the Nordic countries, but not only. So I'm working in the global unit as a senior specialist, and I also have some functions in the International Committee for Animal Recording. And due to those duties, I have also visited South Africa. So it's not entirely unknown to me how things look like over there. And of course, I do realize that what I'm going to present is from a very different background and environment. So I'll just say a few words about the Finnish milk production first. Yes, we are in the other end of the world, so to say. The milk production, well, the population of Finland is much smaller than South Africa. We are only about 6 million people. We produce 2.2 billion liters of milk per year. We have a little short of 4,000 recorded herds. Almost all of our herds are in the milk recording system. And here you can see the average herd size, which is not very big. Nice production figures. And what is very important is that in fact nowadays about 49% of our cows are in automatic milking, are being milked by robots, which also gives a lot of stress on data transfer because the robots are collecting data all the time. In Finland, what is remarkable about the data collection system, I would say, is that we have it integrated in many ways. And if we look at what sort of data we have managed to integrate, then in Finland, like in all European Union countries, we have something called the cattle movement register. That means that every animal has to be marked and registered, and this is something that farmers have to do by laws. And in this system, they have the dates of birth and death, and they have the movements of animals from farm to farm and to slaughteries and so on. This is time limited. This is sanctioned. It is a very it's a very efficient but limited system. And obviously, when we are doing anything else with the animals, this is a basis of data on them that we want to have, so that the farmers would not need to report the same information again and again. And that's why we have built this this cattle movement register. It is a state system, so that is not run by us, but we have built connections to it so that we can have this data, or the relevant parts of it, let's say, for herd management, milk recording, and breeding purposes, because we need the same data for all of these purposes. And in these services, we need much more data than just this, but so that we have at least this basic data as it comes from the mandatory register. Then we have this milk recording and dairy advisory services, where we have the data that was mentioned before, but we add to those mandatory data, we add the artificial insemination and mating data. We add data on milk yield and composition. We add data on feeds and feeding for advisory purposes. We have stock records. We want to record what sort of technologies are being used on the farms, and we calculate production cost, and we want to have that also integrated into the same data, pieces of data. So we have all this in the milk recording and dairy advisory system, and the data side of it is run by my employer. Within this system, of course, all the data belongs to the farmer, so the farmer has to authorize anyone whom they want to be able to see the data in the system, and then the data is shared according to actual need. If well, we don't, for instance, share if let's say a farmer records a birth, then that birth data also goes from the milk recording to the mandatory reporting system for the state purposes. But if the farmer calculates a production cost, we would never share that with anyone whom the farmer has not authorized to see it. So that doesn't go to the state records. If you understand what I mean here, this is the organization that ProAgria is the organization that handles the milk recording and dairy advisory services on the field. Then we have the breeding evaluation and selection part. Here we have, of course, we need all the data that was mentioned before. Then we also need the pedigrees, cow events, production data, health and fertility data, which is also important in the Nordic breeding evaluation system. And then what it gives out is the breeding values. It gives possibilities for matching the cows and bulls, and then finding the best animals for the next generation. This is all integrated into the data exchange is integrated to the same system. Then, as I mentioned, we have a lot of robotic milking farms. So a very important part of data exchange is farm management software from different companies that are running the milking systems, and even if it's not automatic milking, then anyway, many of our farms have systems that record the milk weights at every milking, for instance. The farm management software, when they are starting a system, they are very happy to get a ready animal list from the advisory system. They are also very happy to get the preceding events of the cows, so that they will have the herd sort of ready to milk immediately. And then what we want to have back is the milking visits. First and foremost, well, of course, if you have a birth in the herd, then if you have automatic milking, you can't even milk the cow if you haven't reported the birth in the system. So there has to be very smooth data exchange between the farm management software, the mandatory cattle register, and the advisory system. Sometimes you can hear arguments that since there is this farm management software, that why do you need milk recording at all anymore? We would say that farm management software works on the minute-by-minute level, while milk recording services have a much longer span, and they are used for a different purpose. So at least we see that farmers mostly seem to think that they actually need both of these systems. Then there are nowadays on the market all sorts of different sensors for heat, rumination, movement, weight, animal shape, animal health status, and we want to be able to connect to these sensors to make better use of the data, because I mean, if we have a sensor and we have a milking machine, and then we have a milk recording database, and they are not connected, then of course we have the information there. But in order to make use of it, it is much better if we can connect it all, so that we can first of all see it in one place, and secondly, there often are interactions within the data that will only make it that will make it much more useful for the farmer in their daily lives. And this is also what we are nowadays working with. We have an animal health data system in Finland where all the animal treatments and medications are recorded together with their withdrawal times. We also have hoof treatments in this system, and and this system combines the data on all sorts of treatments, and we also want to make use of this data in herd management and in animal breeding. And then the veterinarians and abattoirs, they have their own purposes for using this same sort of data, and that's why it is very important to combine with other data sources, which we are doing in practice. Yes. Then we also have connections with milk buyers. We get from the milk buyers, we get lab results. In Finland, the dairy labs are run by the milk buyers, which is a very, of course, unusual situation worldwide. But we also get bulk milk data so that we can compare the milk recording results with whatever milk has been sold to milk buyers on a daily basis. And the milk buyers in Finland, they want to have back the cow lists for them to be able to also do some more up-to-date reporting, which we also do on the basis of what we get from the milk buyers. And then we have built connections to abattoirs, so that the farmers have an easy way to report animals for slaughter or for brokering. In Finland, we have a system where dairy farms usually sell bull calves at the age of 2 weeks to the abattoir, but not for slaughter, but the abattoir will sell them on to another farm where they grow them to the age of about 18 months or so, or 20. So in this system in the system that we have a possibility that the farmer just simply registers that they want to sell these animals, and we send it to the abattoir, and when the abattoir actually comes to get them, then there will automatically be created an event for the national cattle movement database. But this, of course, is completely based on the farmer's wishes. If the farmer doesn't want to do this, then they can use other ways to report the animals, and they can, of course, they have a choice of abattoirs to select. So it's up to them. But we have at least these three we work with, the biggest ones in Finland. What have we learned when building these these data connections? We have learned that mutual trust and will to cooperate are very, very important. Without them, you can't really have integration. There has to be, I mean, if there is an integrator like us who is farmer-owned, then it will mean that, for instance, abattoirs who are each other's competitors, they will be more likely to work with a neutral body like us than they would be with each other. But we feel that information sharing is crucial. In today's world, if you want to keep all the information for yourself, you prevent it from becoming as useful as it would be in an ideal situation. We have also noticed that when we want to integrate, there often are scale issues. Finland is a small country, small milk producer, and when we talk to companies like Delaval and Lely, which are worldwide global organizations, they may or may not be willing to accommodate to what we want to have. And that's why we have noticed that when we join forces with other organizations that do the same thing in other countries, that will give us a much stronger position to talk to global companies and have cooperation with them. What this data integration has, why do we do it? I mean, one of the very important reasons is that we want to have the farmer, or our farmers actually, they only want to save data once. That if they have a piece of information, they've saved it somewhere, they don't want to do it again for some other purposes. So, they don't want to pay for some other people to come and collect the data again if it's already saved somewhere. So when the data is saved once, it can be used many times for many purposes, which we consider very important. Also, when we save the data only once, we will avoid errors. The data will be the same everywhere where it's needed. If you have separate data collection avenues for the same data, then you'll probably end up in a situation where the data looks like A in one avenue and like B in another. And then the very important thing, that when we have the data, we can combine data from different sources through this integration. It will provide the farmers with much better tools for decision making. So this was what I had prepared, so thank you for your attention. And is there going to be time for discussion now or later?
Yes.
I don't know, but
Yes,
yeah.
thank you, Master Juho. We will clap for you. I don't know if you will hear, but any questions from the floor at this stage? If not, I have an issue that I would like to raise. What you emphasized very clearly is the importance of collecting data, collecting lots of data to base decisions on data, which is excellent, of course. The issue is, in South Africa, the commercial sector has similar systems, not insofar as reporting to the authorities when a calf dies. I doubt if it's at that I know it's not at that level, but in terms of performance data, that type of thing is collected regularly, continuously, because it has value. It requires, of course, a significant investment in hardware and in software, which unfortunately the smallholder sector in South Africa will not be able to fund. And that's a dilemma we have. This morning we had a presentation by Manishri about the size of the commercial sector and the small-scale sector. And I don't know if you noticed, the commercial sector is 35,000. Of course, it's a few thousand more or less, but that's the number. The number for smallholders she gave was 300 to 750,000. And that figure the difference is 100+% between the lower margin and the higher amount. So yes, we miss information for our smaller farmers. Any suggestion from your side in terms of how we can start the process of collecting better data for the farmers in South Africa, especially the smaller ones?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and actually I would like to say that where we are coming from in Finland is a situation where in the 1970s our average herd size was 5 cows, and when we already started collecting the data. But of course back then the data was being collected from the farms on paper, and then there was a central computer, and that was a very slow process. But nowadays, due to technological advance, I would dare to say that a lot of even these smaller farmers in South Africa probably have, for instance, cell phones and connections, and so that for instance there could be a possibility to use, let's say, some sort of small apps for data collection, even in those cases. Of course, they will not have robotic milking or big parlors where the data is collected automatically, but we do know that you can measure the milk. For instance, if you want to keep records of milk production, you can measure the milk with a weigh or a volume meter, and create records that way. So I think there's always ways to start, but it has to be relevant to the setting where we are entering with it.
Thank you very much. I think your answer is very relevant. The fact is that you can start small and build up over time, and we have the technology these days to be able to do that. Thank you for that. Any other questions for you? Yes, please. Microphone.
Afternoon. Thank you for the interesting talk. I just want to firstly excuse my lack of knowledge in terms of livestock and cows specifically. I just wanted to find out, so I know you moved or you have this robotic milking system going on. I just want to know, with the quality of the milk that you produce, firstly, quality, do you find that between robotic and also when you have like actual people down there milking the cows, isn't the robotic more stressful on the cow and therefore maybe affecting quality? Have you ever looked at whether robotic system is more stressful when milking the cow, and have you tested the difference between the quality when you have the robotic system and your prior system that you had with actual individuals that were milking the cow? Thank you.
Thank you. You?
Yes, I'm not entirely sure if I heard it all correctly, because there seems to be some problem. But if I understood that the question was about the differences between robotic and conventional milking, and
yes, and specifically about if there were quality differences and if there is a stress factor involved. Is robotic milking more stressful than conventional, and would that cause quality differences?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Actually, well, when we look at the results and when we look at the system, robotic milking means that the robot is actually milking the cows all the time, and the cows can choose when they go to be milked. They usually go to the milking robot like 2.7 times per day, which is more often than they would usually be milked in a parlor or a more traditional setting. And because they have this choice, I would say that it's not more stressful. I would say that it even could be less stressful. It depends a lot on how things are done on the farm. I mean, in a parlor system, you may have a situation where the cows have to be squashed in between other cows for like an hour before they actually get into the milking parlor, and I would think that's more stressful than just simply walking into the robot and getting milked. From the point of view of the results, the cows in a robotic system tend to give a little more milk than the ones in a more traditional setting, and there is well, no real difference in fat and protein. The cell counts are also practically the same. If there are issues on the farm, then they might get high cell counts due to mastitis, but this is not something that robotic milking really has an effect on.
Thank you very much. You answered the question quite well. Any more questions, Petronella?
Please closer to the microphone. I can't hear you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now right.
All right, so I just wanted to give a different angle to the discussion. I was just sitting here thinking, okay, this really sounds like something that is great, and trying to imagine how would we implement it in our smallholder farming systems. And then I remembered an encounter that I had mid-July when I was farming, until I went to this place with somebody that is a philosopher, a Dutch lady that specializes in African philosophy. I went to exactly the same farmers that I've been going to for years to talk about, socio-economic aspects of livestock research. And I was shocked at how little I knew about livestock systems in this area. I'll just give you an example. When we started asking them, okay, what is your relationship with livestock? There was one lady that we were taken to. She'd been keeping livestock for many years, and then her husband passed on. She continued keeping the livestock, but the kids all moved to the city, so she remained there with this head of cattle. But they helped her employ somebody, a header, that really was very disrespectful, wouldn't listen to this woman. The cows were getting stolen. It was just chaotic, the whole situation. So the children eventually decided that she must sell the 30 or so plus cattle that she'd had, just to save her health. And when we went to see her, it was a few weeks after this decision to have to sell the cattle. She said to us, at the end of the day, when the cattle are coming back and I hear the bells, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Like there's a child that is supposed to come here that has died but is not coming home. Mm-hmm. So, I was really shaken, because I've always thought, okay, excuse the language, Atian, but I've always thought, okay, it's white people that get so attached to
animals.
To animals. But now I realize that, okay, the same way that you're attached to your cat or your dog, our people are really attached to this animal. And she's not in any way, not economically rational, because when you ask her, she'll tell you about the value of this cow in terms of the milk, the value on the market. She knew the market prices and everything. So it's almost as though there is this coexistence of the different dimensions of livestock system, that if you're going to bring in any innovation and you dare miss one of those dimensions, then you're never going to understand what went wrong with your brilliant technology. So I just wanted to kind of answer myself, and I also asked Atian whether this is something that would work in our system. I think we would really need to have a lot of considerations because of these additional nuances that come with livestock systems. Thanks.
Thank you, Petronella. You want to add something?
Well, I do agree that of course, whatever you do, you have to do it in the local context, taking into account the things that affect the local farmer. Actually, we also have some people who are very attached to their cows, in the sense that when we've had a lot of farmers closing production in the last decades, and it's really very difficult for very many people, and not because they are losing money, but because they are losing the animals.
Yeah. Thank you very much. If there's one thing I've learned in a few years in research that I've been involved, which is a few decades, is that you need humility and a curious mind always as a researcher. You must always remain curious, not make assumptions about what other people and farmers know and what they do, and provide for their rationality and say, but this is why they do things. Thank you, Petronella. Thank you. I think it was a very important discussion, this about the importance of data and that we have a responsibility to get better data. I'm going to end the session now with a thanks to Africa Bio and the ARC that I work for facilitating this particular discussion. Thank you very much also to the speakers, you and Petronella, and thank you for those of you who were patient and interested in this session. You can give yourself a round of applause to end off.
Dimensions, different spheres, different experiences, and I think all our panelists, some are still here, some have left, some are online, but I also thank the audience, those who are physical and those who are online as well. And there's a work program ahead of us. I think there's dinner after this, there's a plenary, then there's dinner, so the day has just begun, so don't disappear. Thank you.